Hello there and welcome to Midnight's Edge After Dark. My name is Tom and today I'm going to take a look at the movie Valerian, the City of a Thousand Planets. Valerian is the latest film from Fifth Element director Luc Besson and is based upon the French comic created by writer Pierre Christian and artist Jean-Claude Mézières. First published in Pilot magazine and ran from 1967 to 2010. Valerian influenced everything from Star Wars to Guardians of the Galaxy, and although Valerian may have got there first by existence, it was a little late to the box office. So Valerian just seems to mimic those that have paid homage to it already. The story begins with a long backstory setting up how Earthlings have branched out off of the planet via a huge space station that grew and grew until the Earth's orbit could not sustain it anymore. So Alpha, as it is called, started to journey out into space. We jump ahead 30 years before our story will begin, as we are introduced to a planet and its people, very reminiscent of the Na'vi in Avatar, who harvest pearls of great power from their ocean, and have a creature that can replicate anything it's fed in an enormous amount. Their paradise is destroyed by falling debris from the sky, and then we flash forward to introduce our two lead characters, Valerian and Laureline, played by Dane DeHaan and Cara Delevingne. We aren't given a lot of introduction. DeHaan, though obviously some sort of intergalactic federal agent, is presented of more of a Star-Lord type, a dash debonair ladies' man, who is the best of the best, and Delevingne plays his partner. The duo find themselves wrapped up in a strange battle between an unknown species, the ones we saw in the opening, and parties that seem to have a lot to hide. Valerian, who seems to be a pretty by-the-book cop, must go against the grain to uncover the mystery surrounding the kidnapping of a commander played by Clive Owen. Valerian is a colorful and imaginative galaxy, and the movie which seems like it's not quite sure at times what it's trying to be. After researching the original comic a little bit more, all I've really surmised is that the film kind of tries to capture who the characters are and this vast, unique collection of worlds, times, and dimensions that exists in this long-running series. Unfortunately, the film tries too hard to be too many things that it has inspired, and this kind of comes off like a carbon copy of a carbon copy of a carbon copy. Not quite as clear as it should be. Though, don't get me wrong, the story is fairly straightforward, not hard to follow. The plot isn't overly stuffed with plot holes or anything, or over-the-top reasons for the action. Most of it feels pretty organic, even if it does seem fairly predictable once you put together a few pieces long before the film's protagonists do. The effects are dazzling, though not as good as the trailers lead on. There are some great-looking shots and characters, but a lot of it comes off like a Pixar film most of the time, or something out of Avatar. The 3D wasn't the greatest as I was hoping it to be, though there are a lot of cool uses as far as distance and showing the vast worlds off, and immersing you into more of the experience. Just not sure if the experience itself is going to hold on to too many people. The problem with the movie, besides not really giving the characters much of an introduction, is the fact that it's frankly pretty boring once you get past the ooh and the ah. The beginning has way too much exposition, though some of it is necessary, not all of it is. Without looking at a watch, I would say it's a good 15 or 20 minutes though before we even get introduced to our heroes. Sometimes the movie just slows down way too much to show us the world that it made, more than just filling it with a good story. Not saying the story is bad per se, it's just a little empty. Kinda like the acting. Speaking of the acting, there's some great voice acting in the film. You can hear John Goodman and of course Beyonce. The leads, on the other hand, not so great. Cara is okay, but doesn't really seem to bring anything to the table that no one else could have. And sometimes her and Dane's character traits cross over a bit too much. Dane, on the other hand, seems to be channeling Keanu Reeves to the entire production for some reason. Whoa. Whoa. It almost gets distracting at times. You're waiting for him to say, whoa, just to ease the tension and stop thinking about it. Unfortunately, his character could have been any action star you want. You get someone like DeHaan to bring something different to the table, but this was not it. He's supposed to be a cool, sexy super cop, but he comes off like a nerdy Keanu, or reboot Kirk wannabe. The actual plot does seem to take some time to kick in, even though it doesn't seem like the action does stop. The film does get a tad boring, perhaps by giving away a bit too much early on, then taking forever to kick in the rest of the plot. I can't explicitly put my finger on it, but though not terrible overall, the film isn't great by any means either. I have a hard time recommending it, but it's one of those movies that really should be seen on the big screen in 3D if you like the format, but not sure it's going to impress and amaze as some may hope it to. It's not a mess in the sense that it's unwatchable in the least. The visuals can be quite chaotic at times though, and it will turn off some viewers. This isn't your standard comic book film. The hero isn't super in any sense, no real powers outside of seemingly being semi-possessed by a princess anyway. There's a lot of big and interesting ideas here, especially when it comes to crossing dimensions. Valerian does show that it is a unique sci-fi adventure story. It is very reminiscent of the Star Trek reboot series, and it's only a pop soundtrack away from being a very bad Guardians of the Galaxy ripoff. Now, I can't speak for the masses, but I myself am growing tired of these green screen quote-unquote epic films that aren't much more than glorified video games or 3D animated films. There was a lot of potential to explore with more practical effects and more of the sets, which there are some that are practical, but still 90% of this is all green screen. And we as the audience have a hard time getting over that uncanny valley. The 3D probably helps some of the effects, but it still doesn't hold up after seeing War for the Planet of the Apes. Despite how the movie's ads and some may be boasting, these effects are nothing you haven't already seen a million times over. Besson gives us a lot of the same that he's given us before with like The Fifth Element. In fact, you can tell there's a lot of the same elements in this movie as The Fifth Element. Not to be punny. Some may find that a bit of a turnoff, some of course will be happy to see the similarities. I myself just found it to be redundant in a lot of ways, and unfortunately I have a hard time really giving this film a good recommendation, though it is a technical feat at the same time. It's interesting to see where $200 million is actually spent when put on screen. Unfortunately, Hollywood hasn't been able to put the stories to those $200 million films as of late, and hopefully in the future they can remedy that. Valerian, though not a complete loss and utter disaster, is just sadly mediocre at best. Unfortunately, it's not much more than your basic run-of-the-mill sci-fi adventure. I expected a lot more from Luc Besson and $200 million, to be honest, and I didn't really get much for that. Yeah, in the comic book, the character is your basic 007 type and doesn't really have much of a character beyond that. There's still a dozen better actors I would have picked before DeHaan to put in this role. He just doesn't really seem like the character in the comics from what I looked at and read. I'm not sure if this movie will spawn any sequels, though it would be interesting to see some more stories in this world. I'm not sure that's going to happen. Those who enjoy the Star Trek reboot films and can't get enough of Guardians of the Galaxy or Star Wars may find something here worth exploring. Although a tad more popular overseas, Valerian's comics haven't quite crossed over to the US culture outside of the influence on the films that I've mentioned already. For all the stunning eye candy and dull acting, run-of-the-mill action cop story draped in flashy sci-fi surroundings really just isn't anything we haven't seen before, as I said. And I can't see it giving too many people what they're looking for this summer. You're better off with Spider-Man or Apes and waiting for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 to hit Blu-ray, and think twice about catching Valerian. The best I can give the film is a 6 out of 10 stars and mildly recommend it.
If you like this video, then please hit that subscribe button. Due to recent changes made by YouTube, we also encourage all of our subscribers, both new and old, to please hit that bell icon next to the subscribe button as well, so you will be notified when new videos are uploaded. Be sure to check back for news and analysis of the happenings and corporate politics behind the scenes of your favorite genre movies, as well as explorations of your favorite characters and their backgrounds and context here at Midnight's Edge After Dark.